Hello, I'm Craig Dalton, a conjoint academic at the University of Newcastle, and I want to give you just a quick overview of the results of the lead and soil studies that were done in North Lake Macquarie in 2017. But first of all, I have to apologise. This has taken us much longer than we expected. We had a change in coordinators of the project, and also the lab moved in the middle of the study. So apologies, we should have got this to you much earlier. If you want me to come to your house and explain anything to do with the study, very happy to make up for that and try and make sure you get all the information that you need on this study. So, to begin with, why was this study done? Back in 2015 we did a blood lead survey of children looking at blood leads across the North Lake Macquarie area. And this was done because there was a lot of media concern about there being elevated lead in soil. So we knew from the past that when the smelters shut, the blood leads dropped dramatically in that area, but there was still a concern that perhaps they hadn't dropped back down to a level below the reportable level of 5 microgram per decilitre. When we did the study, we sampled about a third of the children in the area, which is not all the kids, of course, but it's still a fairly good sample. But we did not find any children with an elevated blood lead. They were all below 5 micrograms per decilitre. So we thought, well, why is this? Why are they so low? It could be that the closure of the smelter has dropped blood leads. It could be that the decrease in lead in the air from the ban of leaded gasoline has had an impact. But let's look at the remaining soil levels and also the dust in houses to see if we can understand what sort of environment these children are living in. So we did 2 studies. We went back to the residences and we tested soil in the yards of the children. You would have seen people testing the soil, digging up the ground, sending some of the samples off to the lab, testing others with a handheld XRF machine. And we also tested inside the houses. There were these small little plastic Petri dishes, and they captured the dust that was falling out inside the house. And they were placed on top of refrigerators and cupboards and areas like that. And they were left for about 3 months. So this is an important point. The soil and dust studies were not done to assess risk to children, as we know the blood lead levels out there are low. And the blood lead levels are the best indicator of whether environmental lead is actually getting into children. It's a much better predictor than just looking at the lead in the environment, because in the end it's the lead in the environment plus the child's behaviour and eating habits that all integrates into producing whatever blood lead the children end up with. So what we found, first on the soil studies, over 40% of residential yards on average were over the health investigation level of 300 milligrams per kilogram, sometimes referred to as 300 parts per million. We found a wide range of soil lead levels in the area. Some were very high, in the thousands, but they were lower than in the 1990s, when well over 70% of the area was over 300 milligram per kilogram. And particularly close to the smelter, they were 100% over 300 milligram per kilogram, particularly in that first 500 metres to a kilometre. So turning to what we found in the dust fallout studies, these give an indication of indoor exposure, for example contamination of foods and hands and food preparation surfaces. What's really going on inside the house? Well, these were much lower than in the 1990s. They're an average of 21 versus 1100 micrograms per square metre per month. So 21 in 2017 versus an average of 1100 in the 1990s, so a massive drop. To show you a graph from the 1990s, you can see on this axis here we have the average lead fallout per square metre per month across many different testing areas in the region of North Lake Macquarie. So as you got closer to the smelter, they're much higher, further away they're much lower. But these are ranging 250 to 1800 with an average of 1100, and yet now it's down to 21, so a massive decrease. And you can see that the current level is well below what we saw in Newcastle in the 1990s. Now, Newcastle was an industrial city. There was lead industry of sorts still there, not as big as Pasminco, of course. There was still lead fallout, and of course lead in gasoline, which put a lot of lead in air getting into houses. So certainly now it's even below the levels that we had in Newcastle back in those days. So in summary, the blood lead levels measured in 2015 were low. We wanted to know, well, what is the environment of kids that have low lead levels? What does their environment look like? And we found the soil lead levels, while still high, appear to be lower than in the 1990s. And the dust fallout in the houses is very much lower. And the levels we're finding of dust fallout at 21 micrograms per square metre per month are a level that's consistent with a low blood lead level. And this suggests there's no ongoing accumulation of lead in children in the North Lake Macquarie area. But we still have to be cautious. There is elevated lead in the soil out there compared to background levels, and this could be a risk to certain children, particularly children with pica, that means they eat dirt or soil, or children with developmental delay under 5 years of age. These children should have regular blood tests that should be discussed with their GPs just to make sure they're not getting an accumulation of lead in their body. And if you want more information on lead exposure, just Google lead exposure New South Wales Health. And I want to thank you all for participating in this study. And again, I do apologise for how long this took, and I am happy to drive out to your house and explain all this information face to face. Okay? Thank you for your assistance.